Hello, my name is Levi Hilton, and I'll be explaining the Nth-Child Selector and nth of type selectors and kind of that sort of kind of functional CSS, we'll call it, to where you're putting in the number of the child and getting out a good view without necessarily having to go in and add unnecessary classes to your content, to your HTML. And so to get started, we will come over here and take a look at our HTML just to get a feel for it. Now it's fairly simple. All I have is a main setup with an unordered list. You can see it down here. I have an H2, bacon is great. And then I have 5 items that follow that. I've just done some fairly basic CSS right here, setting the unordered list width to 50% so that we can kind of get a good feel of it and it isn't overwhelming. Anyway, the list has a small margin as well as some padding just so that we can get a good view of the colors that we're going to be adding further on. Okay, the first example that I want to look at is this Nth-Child Selector. So now, if we come into here, we're able to see that there is the element ID or name, which is the list item, LI. And then we have this selector for nth child. Now we've put the value 3 in there to show us something that's pretty interesting that might be confusing at first, but we'll go through it. So I set it to the background color of orange. So now we come through here. You'd think that this would go through and select the third list item, right? But that is actually not the case. We see that it's item 2 that is actually orange, and so let's run through and take a look at what this Nth-Child Selector is doing. So it's actually going through and figuring out where the list items are, and then it goes to the parent and finds the third child of that. So the first child would actually be the header, bacon is great. Then the second child would be this list item, and the third child would be item 2. So that kind of gives us an idea of how that works. Now, there is a way, if we keep coming down here, there is a way to make it work so that you don't necessarily have to know if there's going to be other items inside your container. And so right here we are using an nth of type. So nth of type, similar to the nth child, I'll get these up next to each other. They take in this number parameter, which is basically it tags onto this list item. And so I have it set to change item 3 to sky blue, and by saying nth of type, it makes sure that this this element type is part of what it's looking at when it counts. And so it'll say, okay, list item, go to the parent. Now I want to count to 3, but I only want to count the list items. So we're still at 0 when we hit this. This one is the first one, second one, and third one. So item 3 is being highlighted. Now we are going to take a look at something that I found interesting while I was looking into the nth of everything and getting this set up. And that's if I come in here and decide, oh yeah, I need, bacon is great, but sausage is better. obviously. So we look at that and like, okay, yeah, this item 3 gets moved down, but this orange Nth-Child 3 just disappears. And so that comes down to the element that is selected. So for this nth child being 3, if we change that to 2, it works. If we change it to 4, it works. But 3, it's pointing to this H2 child. And so this is not an H2 selector. So it's not going to apply that CSS to an item that isn't it, even if it is the 3rd child. So if we change this to an H2 selector, then we are able to get the correct CSS properties onto it. So now we're going to go to another example, which is similar to the nth child and nth of type child, or nth of type selectors, which is the last child selector. So on this, we come through and we see, okay, we have a list item, the last child. So we can kind of get that it'll come to the parent unordered list and then basically go start from the back and give you the first one. And so that's really nice if, for example, you have a footer that you want to make sure is always a certain color in a table, or really anything of that sort. But there's also the example of the first child. And so I'm going to change this to list item because, I mean, just to emphasize the point that I made before of if the first child is not a list item, it's not going to apply this background color of hot pink to it. You have to make sure that it is actually that item. Oh, and I just totally broke it because it's pointing to the root first child. So sorry about that. Let's change that back to H2. And there we go. We have the first child as being the right color that we want. Okay, so now that we have kind of gone over the principles of this, let's take a look at a real life example. This is something that I had to do for one of my jobs where we're working for a company and they wanted an organized way of viewing their employees, their job titles, and other information such as like cell phone number or other stuff like that. But the issue with what we had was at first it kind of just looked like this. It looked like, okay, yeah, we have a table and we have all these lines, but it was hard to keep track of where you were at. Say if you were going through and you're like, okay, yeah, I'm here. You look away and then you come back and boom, where was I at? So I came over here and searched up good looking table in HTML and it came up with this. You can see it's well organized. You're able to follow that March was $85,000. January was $50,000. You're able to see that this is clearly a header and not an entry in the table. And we kind of want to go for a similar feel, though the colors that I've selected are not the best. Don't use these colors. This is to burn it into your head. They just don't look good. But it teaches us a good principle of how to use this. So I have this nth of type just so that we aren't using any random stuff. I know that each row has to have this and we don't necessarily want anything else to be this way. But we have this number, and I say number in quotation marks, of odd. So basically that's any number that is odd will be put into this and included into this CSS selector. That makes it the ugly color of hot pink, which may not be ugly to some people, but wait till you add what other color, or wait till you see what other colors I have added into it. And so because we can do odd, we can clearly do even, which is great. And will fill, I don't know, you'll be able to use it with lots of different things. But if you look at this, we can't really tell that this top row is the header row when really it is. So what we have is a first child selector to change that color, that background color, so that we know that, okay, yeah, this obviously isn't the same, it's not the same situation as the other ones. And so with that, we're able to make a table which, although the colors are horrendous, is more readable. We're able to associate Jim Halpert as the head salesman, and he's in sales. And whereas before, it was kind of difficult to do that because it's just all one color. So yeah, if you have any questions, be sure to leave a comment and I will see if I can help out.